G'day ladies and gentlemen, it's your mad mate Yorick here, and I hold no qualifications in banking and finance. But then I don't hold qualifications in much, and I've never let that stop me from flapping my gums, have I? And on that note, thank you all very much for watching those videos, and the few of you who subscribed. It's nice to know that there are some people who at least are interested in when I post something up or publish something, or whatever the term is. You know, when I make a new video, put it on YouTube, there's almost a dozen people that get some sort of notification, and that gives me a real warm and fuzzy. But what I didn't get a warm and fuzzy from today was the Reserve Bank of Australia, RBA, which is our central bank, sort of like the Federal Reserve in the United States, has dropped the cash rate, the interest rate that they loan money to banks, down to 1%. And I'm not sure if it's such a good thing. Please, if you do, let me know in the comments below. Happy to be proven wrong as always. But at 1%, you start to think that nobody's making money. You know, the Australian, unlike the US economy that's now going great guns, the Australian economy seems to have stalled back in, 2010. We sort of got over the hump of the GFC, and it's been pretty stagnant. The only thing that's really increased is house prices, but unlike in the US, where their crisis was caused by lending money to people who couldn't afford to make the repayments after the honeymoon period, but it was all going to be okay because after the honeymoon period they'd be able to sell the house and still walk away with a profit. I think that's how it worked. I think that's sort of how the subprime market operated. And then it didn't eventuate because too many people were selling too many houses and there was a glut on the market and blah 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 blah. As I say, I'm not qualified in this stuff. There are much smarter people than me that can really explain the nuts and bolts of it all. But by continually dropping interest rates here, I don't think it bodes well for us as a country. It's basically saying that our economy is going nowhere, and these really clever people who are on the board of the RBA think that by dropping the rates 0.25%, so they were at 1.25, they're now at 1, and dropping 0.25% is somehow going to get people investing in businesses, in all sorts of things. And one of the big questions for me is, in Australia, what's left to invest in? We have literally done away with so much of our manufacturing on the basis that it could be done cheaper elsewhere, which is, maybe we should get a warm and fuzzy feeling out of the fact that we've pulled a few 100 million citizens of the People's Republic of China out of poverty. But how many Australians are going to end up potentially on breadlines? When you work it out at 1%, if you were getting 1% on your, let's say you had money in the bank, right? Let's say you had $1 million in the bank, right? You probably had to work long and hard to save up that $1 million. For most of us, it doesn't just fall in our laps with regular monotony. And at 1%, $1 million would be getting you $10,000 a year, right? 200 smackaroos a week, roundabouts, right? Now, because of our tax regime, you wouldn't be paying tax on it, but still, to save up, to spend your life saving up $1 million for it to return less than a pension doesn't seem right. Now, the banks obviously on their term deposits are going to have to offer you more than that because they're only allowed to borrow so much from the Reserve Bank, and the rest has to come to deposits on which they're paying interest. Pundits are now saying, oh, you'll get 1.99%, or call it 2%. You know, you're going to get $20,000 a year after you've busted your nuts to save $1 million. To me, it doesn't seem worth it. You can't blame the banks for what they're doing. You know, it's a competitive marketplace and they only have to offer so much, because money, when it comes to banking, is like any other product being sold in any other shop. You know, you walk into a bank and it's effectively a money shop. The only difference is that they buy money off all sorts of people, including you and me, which are the deposits that we make, and they sell money to people like you and me, which is what we call mortgages and loans. And they have to make sure that they're selling the money for more than they're paying for the money. That's simple, and I get that. But because things are so slow here, the banks aren't prepared to pay any more for that money because they don't think they'll be able to lend it out for too much more than that. Well, I heard somewhere many years ago that the net return on investment was something like 1%. You know, and if you went into a business for a 1% return, you'd be told you got rocks in your head. But the banks just have so many of these dollars running around in the system that to them 1% turns into billions and billions of dollars. Good on them. So I don't know what the answer is to that. I mean, if you're looking to borrow money, it's fantastic for you because it means your repayments are going to be lower this week than they were last week, if the banks in fact pass on the rate cut. But if you're relying on your savings to provide you an income, you are screwed. And unfortunately for Australia, I certainly can't see any end in sight. You know, I'm not going to tell you what you should do, what you shouldn't do, where to put your money, where not to put your money. Hey look, I blew the GDP of a small third world nation on a motorbike, just so I could chew your ear off and show you some of the beautiful scenery that is the streets of Melbourne, Australia. So, you know, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what the answer is. You know, a lot of people say, oh, you know, the American economy is strong because, you know, America's a war machine. They're always at war. The American economy is based on war. Yeah, that may be the case. But I don't know. I mean, you got 350 million of those little Yankee buggers running around inside their own country, buying stuff, making stuff. I mean, they still make a lot of stuff in the United States. You know, I mean, Trump's tried to have a bit of a tariff war with China, and you know what? Why shouldn't he? You know, I think the world's had enough of this whole global economy thing. You know, I think Americans want their governments to look after Americans. Australians want their government to look after Australians. The Chinese people, it's the Chinese government's problem. But that doesn't help a lot of people today who've just had their income slashed by 1/5, 20% of your income. They're just gone. You know, before you had his money in the bank. And a lot of retirees these days have super pensions and all sorts of things, but you know what, even they suffer when the economy goes south. You know, it's getting harder and harder to live. They reckon our inflation rate is down to 1.6 or 1.8%. Now, I know massive inflation isn't a good thing, because that means the money you earn today won't buy you the same amount of goods and services as tomorrow when you go shopping. But is low inflation a bad thing? And then I've got to ask, how in Australia can we have low inflation when we're paying some of the highest prices in the world for being able to heat our homes or read a book at night or even watch the telly, or for you to watch this video? Fuel prices keep going up and up and up. I'm sure they haven't kept pace with inflation. Hasn't been a real wage increase in this country for a number of years. It makes it difficult. As I say, especially a town like Melbourne, you know, the only things that have really improved is housing prices, but at the end of the day you've got to live somewhere. So it doesn't matter that, you know, the house I bought 10 years ago is now worth 3 times the amount, unless I'm prepared to sell it and then go and buy a house that's worth 3 times the amount it was worth 10 years ago. Ooh, hello Dodge. So, and even if I was to move further out into suburbs that weren't as expensive to live in as the one I live in, then yeah, I might end up with some dollars in my pocket, but it's kind of false economy, because then I'm saying, oh, I was very rude, I didn't nod to that motorcycle rider. You're prepared to sell up and live under a bridge, and I've got a sneaky suspicion that a lot of the increase in the value in inverted commas in the housing market has been due to an influx of foreign money coming in. It's just where my thinking's at. I've got no proof, but I am concerned for the fuel. Slipped on the running board. But I am concerned for our economic future here. I think a lot of people should be. You know, you hear my parents' generation, who are sort of my age, back in the 80s, when home loan mortgage rates were 17%, and if you had a business loan you were paying 19%, and they say, yeah, sure, we were paying a shitload of interest, but everyone was having fun and making money. Now look, I'm very fortunate. I've got a nice job, they pay me nicely for what I do, and I enjoy it. I get to have fun on a daily basis because, you know, to be honest, I'm a big kid with the attention span of a goldfish, and there's always variety and different things going on every day. But are people having fun anymore? Are businesses really making money anymore? I think running your own business and being self-employed is a bit of a furphy. I think successive governments have convinced us that yes, go and be an entrepreneur and run a small business, but you know what, you do that and all you've done is create a job for yourself, for the most part. Very few people become multi-millionaires just working on their own. It's only once you take that leap. It is. At some point it's got to be a leap of faith to start employing people to do the grunt work of what it is you do, so that you can be freed up to go and find the next lot of work for the grunt people to do the grunt work that you make a little bit off every time they grunt. But even if you had a massive business turning over absolute truckloads of cash, what do you do with it? You don't want to just leave it sitting in the bank, but then where do you put it these days? I mean, this video is more about me wanting me wanting some answers. Not that I got anything to invest, but if you did, what would you do with it? Where's a good sort of place to domicile your spare money so that when you're old and busted up, you've got enough that you can live off? I mean, it used to be really easy. You think about it. Even 2 generations ago, like a bloke would retire at 65, he'd be dead by 67. His wife might live to be 75. So they'd need enough money for one person to live off for 10 years. Right? That's basically how it worked. But now, someone retires at 65, average life expectancy is 80, at least for both of them. So now you've got to keep 2 people alive for 15 years, which is like keeping one for 30. You need a lot more cash. A lot more cash. Especially when you consider, at the moment, you're only going to get 1%. And you think about it, even if you've paid off your house. Now, let's say you've retired and your house is paid off, it's free title. Right? You work it out. Running a car costs you a couple $100 a week. Right? Even if all you're doing is go to the shops and back. Because the other thing we've got to take into account is retirees don't live like retirees did 2 generations ago. You know, oh, I'm retired, I'm going to sit around and potter in the garden. Well, no, these days they want to go and do road trips and buying caravans and big ass 4-wheel drives to schlep them around with. They haven't retired from life, they've simply retired from work, and that's a big difference. But it's getting harder and harder for these people to find ways of sustaining themselves. Governments are successively winding back pensions. And here's an idea I had regarding superannuation. Don't take my word for it, I don't know if it will work. Some very clever economist has probably done the numbers and worked out that it won't. But in Australia anyway, if I put money into superannuation, I'm not allowed to touch that money till I'm 65. Well, there's some rules. You can start a transitioning phase at 60 or something. I don't know, right? I'm too young to bother about how I can access money that has forcefully been saved on my behalf and put into a fund that I have no say in what they do with it. So here's my idea. If I can't touch the money till I'm 65, the government can't touch the money till I'm 65. No tax, no levies, no fees, nothing, right? Once I turn 65, and until such time as I turn 65, I can put as much money as I want into superannuation, right? None of this threshold and caps and this and that, right? If I've worked out a way that, you know, let's say I've got a full-time job and a part-time job, if I've worked out a way to live without spending the money for the part-time job, I should be able to put 100% of that income into my super fund. And the government can't touch it. Not a red cent. However, when I do retire and I'm earning a pension off it, right, so I'm just earning interest off it, then the government can tax me as though I'd be working. Right, so if my super fund pension pays me $50,000 a year, I pay the tax on that $50,000 as though I had been working. And that can go on in perpetuity, because I can then say, after I've passed on, that I can then put that wad of money into the super fund of my spouse, my children, whoever I may choose, as long as they're an Australian resident for taxation purposes, which means the government could really be earning money off me after I'm dead in perpetuity. And that way, we really build something massive for our country. I think that's a good idea. But then I also thought making a peanut butter and salami sandwich a couple of hours ago was a good idea. So I'm not the best person for you to take any sort of advice from, or even consider. I certainly hope I haven't given any advice. In fact, thank you for taking the time to read the disclaimer I put at the start of this video, because nothing I've said here today is intended to be advice. This is just me spitballing. This is me just working through ideas, rattling around in my head, going, well, I've just heard the news about the RBA and yeah, I'm not convinced. I know anyone with a mortgage is going, yes, and hey, my mortgage repayments go down. I'm happy about that, but is it in the best interest of the country? Yes, I'm happy for me as a mortgage holder, but you know, we've got to think bigger picture. Where does it all lead? And I think it leads down a good path. Because if people are borrowing money at, I don't know, 4%, 5%, even 6%, when the economy gets cracking again, and the banks are going, well, now the RBA has put the rates up to 7%, and we're going to have to charge 10%. There's going to be all these people who won't be able to afford to stay in their houses because they overextended themselves at 5%. It's, I find it concerning. I suppose a lot of people will be celebrating tonight that they won't be paying as much to keep a roof over their head this month as they did last month. And on that note, thanks for watching, thanks for listening, thanks for hearing me out, thanks for just giving me a platform to talk crap for however long this video has gone for. If this is the first time you've seen any of my videos, please get onto my channel, subscribe, hit the little bell thing. Apparently that helps. I haven't been doing this YouTube thing for long, so I'm really not too sure how it works. You know, but I hope to make more content as time goes on. Hopefully you'll all enjoy it. But until then, catch you later.